Howdy folks, and welcome to the chefinthegrape.com. I am your host, Chef Christoph, and tonight, continuing the conversation about the wines of Chile with a fantastic vintage from Don Melchor. I'm not sure that I pronounced that correctly. I'm Irish, not Spanish. But Don Melchor, many of you might recognize from your Costco shops. Costco, both in the US and in Canada, has purchased a reasonably large quantity of the Don Melchor 2011 Cab Sauv, and I was lucky enough to be gifted one of those bottles. They run about $45, $50, $55 in the US, depending on which state you're in. And in Canada, they'll run you $65 and up. And to my mind, great value. And Don Melchor actually comes from the Concha y Toro winery, which you may be more familiar with their bulk wines. But just because a winery is producing table wine, that doesn't mean that they can't be producing Premier Cru or first growth quality. And in fact, the reverse is also true. Just because a winery is producing Premier Cru quality doesn't mean they can't also be producing great table wine. So in this instance, we find a separate label, which many wineries will do, that represents just a higher level of quality for what they're doing. And Don Melchor is highly respected for the work that they're doing, especially with Cab Sauv. And not without reason, because what they have done is they have a property in the Uco Valley where they have noticed that 6 different vineyards give 6 very different expressions of Cab Sauv. Now it is blended, which is not something you see on the front of the label. It is blended with a little bit of Cab Franc. And the percentage changes depending on which year, which vintage you're talking about. This particular vintage we're talking about is the 2011 Puente Alto vineyard. And in this, they've put 1%. Now, in theory, 1%, it shouldn't make that big of a difference. But in fact it does. And if you want to think about it from a culinary point of view, 1% salt, now 2% salt, whew, huge difference. 1% chili peppers, 2% chili peppers, huge difference, right? So the 1% of Cab Franc actually can make a lot of difference. Now let's take a look at this wine. Look at that. See, this is what we love to see in wine. Deep, dark, inky, full of concentration, beautiful bright garnet highlights to this. This is a wine that's just bursting with life. Once again, we're making these notes in the spring of 2016. So this wine is already 5 years old, but it looks like it's 2.5, 3 years old at most. And the nose, now I've had this open for a while, so it's starting to develop quite rapidly. But for 5 years old, it's showing developing characteristics. So it's no longer an immature wine. This is a wine that's really starting to come into its own after 5 years of life. So it's got what we would expect, red raspberries, red currants, but there's a bit of a hint of tomato or tomato leaf to it as well, which I'm not used to from Cab Sauv or Cab Franc. The Cab Franc sometimes can come across as being a little green, so perhaps that's what I'm interpreting. And there's some stony minerality to it. Anyways, on the palate. Oh, wow. Bright, brisk, clean, full of life, full of dimension. Medium plus to full, and let's just call it full acids, razor sharp, brilliant, bursting with life, red currants all the way. Tannin structure, medium plus to full, fine grained, but still with a nice little bit of chew to them. This is also integrated, so beautifully balanced. Drink it on its own, an absolute delight. I cannot tell you how delightful it is just to sit back with a glass or three of this. With food, I think I would stay away from things that were too high in fat, and I would, I'll have to think about that as we go through the wine notes. Concentration, medium plus to full, and mirrors the nose brilliantly. Everything that we got on the nose and then some on this. And I love that beautiful, almost saline minerality that's coming through. And there's a bit of a saltiness to it. It's not quite sea salt, right? But there's something like that. Really delightful. Talked about the price, great structure, score, 91 plus points, beautiful wine, world-class wine, absolutely. You could pour this for anyone, anywhere, and any cab lover is going to absolutely delight in it. This is not the same as a Left Bank Bordeaux blend, not at all. However, for people who love Left Bank Bordeaux, if you love Margaux, if you love Pauillac, there are things in this wine that you will thoroughly enjoy. And for about $50 a bottle, it's great. Like, it's just a great value. And getting back to what I'd want to pair it with, I think I'd go really French. And, you know, there's nothing quite as lovely as steak tartare. Just a little bit of great steak, cut by hand, minced up, a little egg, a little Worcester, some caper, and some bread to put it on. And this, what a delight, what a treat. I hope that you and I get to continue this conversation on Facebook at The Chef and the Grape, on Twitter at A Student of Wine, and of course here on the YouTube channel at Christoph, Kristof Gillies, Gillese. If you're enjoying it, please just go ahead, click that like button, click the share button, and I hope you look for this in your local market. Once again, this is the Don Melchor 2011 Single Vineyard Cab. I hope you enjoy it as much as I.